Hi, good evening. How are you? Nice to see a lot of familiar faces. I'm Otto Barnum. I'm one of the guys. Can you guys hear? Good. Hello. 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 Hi. Thank you. Sorry. I'm Emily Otto Barnum. I'm one of the guidance counselors. Hi, how are you? That's Julie Mazzola. We're all going to share tonight in the presentation. Welcome. Quick show of hands. How many of you have been through this process before? Great, some experts in the room. For those of you that haven't, this is a very exciting time. It is not stressful. We are here to reassure you that everything's going to be fine. A couple things about this process. One is that everyone is going to be probably at a little bit of a different place in the journey. So knowing that in the back of your mind, kind of bear with us, because we're gonna go back 30,000 feet again and back you up and provide a lot of context, but at the same time, we're also gonna zero in on some of the nuts and bolts of the process. And all of it is great. Wherever you are and wherever your students are is great. We will help you and your students, your children, figure out where they need to go from wherever they are today or tomorrow. So we don't want you to worry about that at all. We kind of like to think about this process in two different ways. One is the process, and when I say the process, I'm thinking about the process of post-secondary planning. For the majority of students, it will be college right away. Some of it will be college right away for 4 years, some 2 years. Some students strongly consider a gap year. Some students will strongly consider the military as an option, going directly to the workforce. And some students, what am I gonna say? Great, that's it. I had something else in the back of my mind. So there's a lot of different options. All of them are great. The process of college admissions and the college application breaks down into, in part, really just the application process, which is sort of truly just an application. It's a lot of biographical information, a lot of talking to your parents about their former education, different places that you might have lived. You enter all the information in terms of your education. Here at Swampscott High School, you enter a bunch of extracurricular activities. A lot of that is just tedious application work. And that is truly just the application, and we will help you and your students get through that. We'll talk about how in a second. And then the other part of it is really the exciting part of it, and the part that truly we love the most in working with students and families about is really the process of self-discovery and what it is that I want in an environment, what kinds of location feels like a good fit to me, what is the culture of a school or a workplace that I feel will suit my needs and my talents and my skills, and that is the really fun part for us. And I think when we speak about it as a journey, that is in part the journey that we're talking about, and that's the part that's also really fun for the students. For many years, it's been an abstract concept for students and families, and now it's getting really real when students go out to visit colleges, when they have the information sessions here, when they have interviews, they're preparing an audition. All of those things become much more real and much more exciting for the students. We don't want you to worry. Is anybody stressed about this process? Just a tiny bit. Okay. We don't want you to worry at all. We will get you through this. We promise you. For the past few years, we track data from our graduates, and almost 100% of them, it's like 99.9%, say they are truly excited about where they're headed, wherever that is. So we're excited for you guys. We're excited for them, and we're here to reassure you that we'll get through everything with you. We don't want you to worry. Tonight, we're going to go over the college application process, an overview of kind of the lay of the land and all of the different pieces and kind of how they fit together. Some application information, standardized testing, the importance of the essay, so the students worry about that a lot. The essay, we'll get to that. Student and counselor collaboration, what pieces the students are doing, what pieces the counselor is doing, and how that works together in tandem. Early application preparation for early action, early decision deadlines, and ultimately financial aid. I am very chatty if you haven't already noticed, so I won't be offended at all if the other counselors come and get me and pull me with the game. So this maybe is not the best visual, but I think it's helpful to have this up here as I'm talking, and Rachel and Julie can kind of go back and forth between this slide and the next slide. We wanted to try to impress upon you and the students that Naviance is really our hub. It is where all of the information for students and their plans needs to live. If it's not in Naviance, you can safely assume that we don't know about it, or we're not aware that it's been made official that a student is applying somewhere or they're doing something that they've told you that they're doing. So if it's not in Naviance, we're not entirely sure that it's happening. We all have a connection to Naviance, and including the teachers. You have a profile that you have your own login for. We have a profile that we have our own login for. The students have their own profile, the most important one, and then the teachers have a profile. And we can all kind of see to varying degrees what's in the student's profile. GPA, list of colleges, college visits, scholarship lists, teacher recommendation information, counselor questionnaire, all of that we have varying degrees of interaction with. But Naviance is where the majority of the information needs to live. That is where the colleges I'm applying to is the name of the list in Naviance. That's where all of the colleges that any student is applying to should live, whether it's on a Common App school. So just a friendly reminder, Common App is the most common application. The majority of our students will apply to a member Common App school. So there's all Common App schools and then all non-Common App schools. So for example, we call those institutional applications. So Endicott, for example, MIT, for example, Georgetown, for example. Some of the UC schools don't have the Common App. So, but those still have to live in Naviance under colleges that I'm applying to. And then kind of off to the side are the institutional applications. There's also the College Board. And that's where the SAT scores and the AP scores and the PSAT information is all housed. When a student applies to a college, let's pretend they're applying to several Common App schools. They're going to go onto the Common Application. When they're done with their application, no matter when it is that that student is done, they send their application to the school. That's why those arrows are going from Common App to all the different schools. We, as a counselor, will send from Naviance to all those different schools. The teachers will send from Naviance to all those different schools. The student will go to College Board and send their information to all those different schools. So they are connected in a way, but really, basically, they're all different organizations, all going to the same place, which is the colleges to which the students are applying, and everyone has varying degrees of responsibility within that. So a lot of that, to go back to my earlier point, is really about that application and that process piece. We don't want you to stress about it, other than to know that they are somewhat connected and that the students need to have all of the information listed in Naviance. We will get through with you and the students all of the logistical pieces. We do not want you to stress about that. Again, it's really just a logistical piece of the process. What's that? Sure. Does anyone have any questions about that before we move on? Okay, great. College Board is connected to the colleges in that colleges ask, as part of the application for the majority of schools, for a set of official scores from College Board. So if a student is planning to submit SAT scores, then they will have to go to the College Board website on their own. They'll go into their account, they log back in, and they click the send score button and they choose the scores for the schools that they want the scores to go to. That is a student responsibility or a family responsibility. That is something that we have really no part in managing for the students. So when the students are done completing an application, they will push submit on their application through Common App or through the institutional application. That application goes directly to the school. The school will start a file on that student, and then the file will begin. Let's say after that, the student will go to the College Board and push send scores. All of those scores will go to the colleges in addition to the application, and to build that application. You may be wondering, okay, my child has an 11/1 deadline. They're pretty much done with the application. we already sent our SAT scores, but we haven't finished the application. What happens? In that case, regardless of who's sending information to the college, if it has your student's name on it, the college has started a file. So whether it's the official SAT scores, the common application that's coming from the student, a transcript that's coming from a counselor could actually go before the students finish with their application, or a teacher recommendation. Any of those things arrive at a college, the college starts the file, and then they just build from all the different places that they're receiving information from. Does that make sense? Great. So you'll see in some cases, now colleges are kind of catching on to this, that the College Board charges money for everything, and one of the costs associated with College Board and the SAT scores is sending the scores to each individual school for those official score reports. So Common App and schools have started to say, we'll save you that for now. We'll allow you to self-report your SAT scores or your ACT scores, and we'll take you at your word for the validity of those scores. And if you're to be accepted and you choose to enroll, then we'll ask for the official score report, which is helpful. So you'll see on the Common App and some of the institutional applications that they'll ask for a self-report of score, and that's perfectly fine and appropriate. However, you will be required in many cases to still send that official score report, and that comes again directly from the College Board. One of the things to keep in the back of your mind, and we kind of get to this in the senior application checklist, and we've talked to the students at length about this, is it's about timing. So even though that it's a click of the button for the students electronically to send the scores, it still can take a few weeks to arrive at the college. And so you want to be really mindful about deadlines, and we would say, like, let's stick within the 3-week deadline. So you want to keep within 3 weeks. So if you have an 11/1 deadline, you're going to back it up, so early October. CSS and FAFSA, it's kind of dark, I don't know if you guys can see this, but those, can everyone see the slides? Okay, great. The final one is FAFSA and CSS profile. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. That is an application for financial aid to the colleges. If you would like your student to be considered for financial aid, most need-based aid, and we'll get into financial aid at the end, towards the end of the seminar, you need to fill out the FAFSA. Students cannot be considered for any need-based aid, and in some cases, actually, some of the schools will say, we won't even consider you for merit-based aid if you don't fill out the FAFSA. The FAFSA is its own website. Again, it's free to send it. You can add up to 10 colleges for which you want the FAFSA to be sent to. It tells the college approximately, based on federal guidelines, how much it thinks you can afford to pay each year towards your child's education. And largely that number will be much higher than you think is reasonable. And that's true for all of us. But that number gets sent to the colleges, and then the colleges will send you what they call a financial aid award letter. Again, we'll get to that in a little bit. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. All public colleges and universities will require that. Another application owned by the College Board is called the CSS profile. The CSS profile is a much longer, more intricate, more extensive, and arguably invasive application. It will take a lot longer than the FAFSA for you to complete, but is required by many of the private colleges and universities and some of the public ones. Not a lot, but some. So you may see that also as a requirement. And we'll get to the nitty-gritty about financial aid towards the end. Yes, good question. Thank you. So the question was, does that cost? And the answer is yes. So thank you for reminding me of that. So whereas the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, the CSS does have a cost associated with it. And if my memory serves me correctly, there's a registration cost. So like you sign up to do the registration portion, and that part takes like 15 minutes, and you pay for that part, and you send it. You also are charged an additional cost for each individual school or college or university that it's being sent to. So that. Okay, yep, Ms. Starman wants to add something. Go ahead.
So testing. Hello? Back up to our testing the College Board. I wanted to just make sure that anybody in the audience who took CT instead of the SAT, colleges accept either or test. So if your child has taken the ACT, it's exactly the same process that Emily was speaking about. where you would log into the ACT, you would send to your schools, and the colleges would, we recommend sending them a few weeks in advance just to make sure that the colleges receive them. But again, ACT or SAT are equally accepted by colleges, and it's the same process. But it is the student responsibility to log in to either SAT or ACT's website and send those scores officially. That's not something that the counselor will manage. So back to, I guess we're staying on the test score topic. So this is going to be a key component of many college admissions. Some schools are test optional, where that means that they will consider an application without test scores, but many colleges require SATs or ACTs. Like I was just saying, they accept them equally. So that's the student responsibility. We've been talking to the students since the winter of junior year about their testing schedule. So hopefully your students have thought about and or already taken these exams. If not, it is now time to register, so we would recommend getting on some exams for this fall. If the schools they're looking at require the testing, you can come down, the students can come down and speak with us if they need help with that. The subject tests, that is, so SAT has a traditional test of verbal and math, and then some of the more selective colleges in the country require SAT subject tests, where they're testing a student on a specific topic. Some colleges, depending on the major you're pursuing, are going to specify what SAT subject tests they need. Other schools just want the students to submit 2 of their choice. I think it's less than a dozen schools in the country that now require that, so we usually err on the side of our students that they do not need to take the SAT subject test, but again, the counselors have been working with these students for 4 years. We are very familiar with, you know, the GPAs of the students, where the students are looking, and so we've talked about this with them along the way. But if that's something that your students are considering taking or have questions about, please have them come see us. And I did mention test optional, so that is a great website, fairtest.org. There is a section on there where you can, it lists all the schools in the country that are test optional. So certainly on each college's admissions website, it will tell you if they need testing, SATs or ACTs. But if you want a quick glance, and actually it might make you feel better, there's so many, hundreds of colleges that are now test optional. So that means they say your child is not at a disadvantage if they do not submit test scores. It means that they will look holistically at all the other parts of the application, and your child will not be at a disadvantage if they don't submit. So we as the counselor work one-on-one with the students. We have various ways where we can see what are the average test scores of the students getting admitted to those schools. If your student is at the average or above the average, we don't see a reason to withhold those scores. However, if the grade point average is right on track, but the test scores are below the average, that might be a great opportunity to go test optional. So there's not one size fits all, it's definitely on a case-by-case basis, but we will work closely with your students to make sure they make the best decision. And to Emily's point, in Common App, which is that separate application that the students are managing, there is a test scores self-report option. So if your child is going test optional to a few schools, they can say no. They do not need to self-report in the Common App, and they would save it for sending the official scores to the schools that need it, and they will withhold that information from the schools that are not supposed to see it.
Hello. We're all kind of chiming in. So just to kind of add on to what they're saying, if you guys have not been into Common App and seen what the children, hopefully the students are working on, because hopefully they're doing it and not you guys, but you can edit the Common App, the application itself, and go in if one school is requiring you to self-report or they're requiring test scores and you have to submit, you can self-report and submit, and then you can go back in and edit and not self-report and then submit to another school if you're doing test optional for that school. So you can go in and edit the Common App to what you're sending to which school. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, great. Next. Oh, we're on a roll. Essays, my slide. So I'm already up here, great. How many of you guys have seen your son or daughter's essay? Okay, great. So this was a summer assignment for all the kids, and this started a couple years ago, and it's really great because it's a great first draft, hopefully, and some kids end up scratching it and starting over, and that's fine too, but it's just a great look at the prompts that the Common App has for the different topics, and it's a great first draft for the kids and for the teachers to get their eyes on some of the writing pieces for the students. So the Common Application has one big essay that the kids have to submit. In this essay, we take a look at as guidance counselors. Hopefully their English teachers are workshopping it with them. Maybe you guys have. We have seen in the past that some of the students are going and you guys are paying money and having some people work with them, and you're a tutor or outside services. That's great. We just hope that the final draft is authentic and genuine from the student. The admission reps can see right through it when it's not. When they share it with us, we can see when Google is just a fascinating tool now, because we can see how many times it's been edited by other people, and at the end of the day, this is a great selling point for the student when it comes to the application process with the colleges. It's a qualitative piece for them. They're not just a GPA anymore. They're just not a standardized test score anymore. This is genuinely who they are as a person, and so it really should be who they are as a person. And so we hope that that's the theme coming from home as well. It's who they are, and not trying to be someone who they're not, or having somebody write it for them. And as guidance counselors, when we work with them, we read it as if we're an admission counselor. We really work hard when the colleges come to visit Swampscott High School, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But these admission counselors are coming in from colleges all over the country, and we sit down and we're forming relationships with them, and we're really picking the brains, asking about letters of recommendation and essays, and we want to know what is that essay that's going to stand out. So when we read the essays from our students, we're putting on our admission counselor's hat, and we're reading it through the lens of them. And it's not so much, we're not the grammar and the spelling police, but we're looking at it as, am I getting to know this person? We really do know your students, but we take that hat off and we look at it as, I don't know you, but if I was an admission rep, after I'm reading this, do I know this student? Did they really depict who they are, and did they come across this way in their essay? A lot of times there's really some cliche topics out there, such as, my grandfather's my role model, and he's made an impact on my life, which is awesome, and I love my grandfather too. However, by the end of the essay, I know a lot about the grandfather, and I know nothing about the student. And so those are the types of topics where we come in and we have to say to the student just that. I love your grandfather. Gosh, I wish, I had him as my grandfather. However, I know nothing about you. And your grandfather's not applying to college, you are, so you need to come across on the paper. We need to know about you and not Papa. So those are the things that we kind of talk to the students about in their essays, and hopefully you guys can reiterate that at home. So that's the big Common App essay. Then there are supplemental pieces. Each college may or may not have additional writing pieces asked of that college. And these are probably just as or more important because they're specific to that college. So we tell the kids, and we've had these conversations, that when the supplemental pieces come up, they really need to do their research on those schools. And it's not, let me go on the website and look up their mission statement and take pieces of that and relate it to my answer of why Tufts. It's not that. It's go on a tour. If Tufts is your #1 school, there has to be some relatable piece of as to why. And be specific. Did you sit in on a class with a professor? Name that professor and what class you sat in on. So be as specific as possible without looking cheesy and looking up their mission statement. We also will look over their supplemental pieces as well. Institutional applications sometimes have their own essay, so if some of your students, our students, your children, are doing Common App schools and then once in a while they have an institutional application, they may have to write a whole nother additional essay. So that does happen as well. So there's a lot of writing that goes on, and we just hope that everyone is as authentic and genuine as possible. Oh, up here, as we will send out this presentation, and there's a link embedded in this. Some essays that worked, that's what it's called, from Johns Hopkins University. There's some great examples of awesome essays that are just really, not only just written well, but the topics are kind of just unique or just really bland, but creative and imaginative and funny. So if you guys want to take a look at that, we put that in there. Oh, yes, last thing. More writing. They'll become great writers at the end of this. So in the Common App, we also talked to the kids about this as well. And they don't love this part, but it's just, we want them to say as much as they can about themselves. And so anytime it says additional information or optional, we say, do it, yes, include it, yes, write it. Give as much as you can of yourself, because you want to be more than that GPA and that number. We want you guys to sell yourselves. So in the Common App, there is a section in the writing section, which is the essay portion. It says additional information, and it asks, is there anything else that you want to include in your application that you just didn't find a place to put? And some kids are like, no, I answered all the questions, it's great, no. But if you click yes, there's another box that you can type another 650 words or 400 words, I don't know. But it's basically another essay if you wanted it to be, but you can really have it be whatever you want it to be. I've seen kids copy and paste their resume. I've had kids write poetry. I've had kids write additional essays, talk about things that they've overcome in high school, talk about great things, elaborate on an activity, include additional activities because they couldn't include all of them in the application. There's a million things that you can write in this piece, and we just ask, give them everything. Keep giving them more and more so that they know everything about you. Any questions on that? Okay.
Great. So I did just have one other thought related to that. The supplemental essays will be something, obviously, that we'll cover in our senior meeting, but, Julie kind of spoke to this. I was just sort of thinking, like, anywhere that they see optional, they should read that as opportunity, and there will be a lot of those. And just sort of mapping out the time management piece, the supplemental essays, especially as you project from here to November 1, which a lot of students will apply for 11-1, that will be something to sort of map out. So if they haven't finished that one Common App essay, kind of thinking about over the next few weeks, how will they fit that all into their life in terms of timing with all of the essays. And so you can find each one of those supplemental pieces. For example, in the Common App, you're going to click on the actual school, and then you'll see there's a link to what they call questions, and the supplements are in there under questions. And some of the questions for some schools are really just about financial aid or Res Life or something like that, but in some cases they're supplemental essays. You don't want the students to be kind of caught off guard in terms of timing, thinking that they're all complete and that's the night before, and then all of a sudden they see they have 3 supplemental essays to write. Okay, so moving forward. As I was sort of describing in the beginning, the teachers and the counselors have a connection to the student's profile in Naviance. Part of the application is qualitative, as Julie was explaining. That is, the GPA and the test scores kind of are what they are at this point. Obviously, senior year is going to continue to be very, very important in terms of academic information, but the pass is the pass, the GPA is set, the transcript is what it is, and the other elements around the application are what are really going to help that student come to life within the admissions committee. Two of those pieces that are very, very important to the student's application review will be the teacher recommendation and what they call the counselor evaluation. We call them a recommendation letter, but it's called the counselor evaluation. Last year, when our team went to the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, we had an opportunity to sit in on the admissions committee and watch them make decisions about students in real time. Very interesting process. But the second thing that they looked at after transcript and test scores was the counselor evaluation. So those pieces of information not only are actually reviewed, but prioritized in many cases. And we take that job very seriously, as do the teachers. So we need both students and parents to help us out with that. So although we've taken a lot of opportunities over the course of the past 3.5 years to get to know your children, and we see them out in the hallways, and we see them in performances, and we see them on the field or on the court, and in classes, it helps us to write their letters when they provide us some additional information. They provide the teachers some additional information. We ask that students, once they identify at least 2 academic teachers that they'd like to ask to write them a recommendation, we strongly recommend that the students have an in-person conversation with those teachers. Not the drive-by like, hey, Mr. Franklin, could you write me a recommendation letter? I have an 11/1 deadline. That they really set up an appointment, that they have a conversation, that they come prepared to that meeting, or they follow up prepared to that meeting with a copy of a resume, a list of activities. Perhaps in the case of Mr. Franklin, he's asked the students to fill out a form, his own form that he uses. Minimally, that they have a conversation and they have some information that they provide to the teachers. Similarly, we ask that the students either complete the resume on Naviance, which is very, very helpful, but we've seen a lot of students actually have already completed a resume, which is great, but to make sure that a copy of a resume, either on Google Docs or in Word, gets shared with the teacher and the counselor, so we can see that. I should have backed up to say there is a resume builder on Naviance that lets the students just enter the information. It blocks out all of the headings and subheadings for the student, and they just enter the information. We say it's a requirement for us writing the counselor evaluation and the teachers to write their recommendation, but you don't have to necessarily do it in Naviance if you have it already somewhere else. So the students should be preparing their resume and activities list. For the counselor evaluation, we tell the students that really it makes it hard for us to write a very three-dimensional letter if we don't have all of the pieces of information. So we lean on what we know about the students and their transcript and all the extracurriculars that we've seen personally, but we also ask them to not only submit the resume, but complete what we call the counselor questionnaire. And that is we reduced it from a couple of years ago to a 10-question questionnaire that asks really more about unique personal experiences of the student. And that, for us, has been very, very, very helpful in developing a letter. The reason for it is, as the admissions director from University of Chicago said to me today, they can see the student's resume or the activities list. They can see all of the information that the student is providing. Our job and the teacher's job, hopefully, is to comment very specifically about the student's unique characteristics both in and out of the classroom. The counselor evaluation job is to paint a beautiful picture of your children in highlighting their strengths and where they've grown and kind of how we see them moving forward into the next step of their life. So we ask them to complete this counselor questionnaire in addition to the resume. We also ask, it's totally optional, again, opportunity, for you, if you have some time, and we know everyone's really, really busy, if you have some time to complete the parent response form, there's a similar questionnaire under the parent, so it's under the parents' login for Naviance, not the students. And similarly, the counselor questionnaire won't show up for you, it only shows up for the students. If you could complete that parent response form, you don't have to write in beautiful full sentences unless you really want to, but even if you threw us a couple bullets, it helps make our letters that much more impactful and more fun for the admissions counselors to read. They get a lot of these letters, obviously, so the more specific and unique they are to your kids, the better off that the students will be. So we ask that you do that as well. the counselor evaluation is part of everything that we send as a counselor. So one of the students' responsibilities, and this is in the checklist, and we've talked to students at length about this, is to request the transcript. And when we say request the transcript, it totally seems simple that it is a click of a button, and that totally is true. It is a click of the button. But the transcript doesn't go on its own. The transcript has to go along with 3 other pieces of information. It has to go with the school profile. It also has to go with, in the case of Common App, a Common App secondary school report form, which the counselor completes. And in addition to that, the counselor evaluation of the recommendation letter. So we can't just send the transcript on its own unless we do it by paper. So we don't send the transcript without all those other 3 pieces of information. So when we ask the students to request a transcript, what we're really asking the students is to request all of the information be sent from the school for a certain deadline. And for that, we ask for at least a 3-week lead time. And the reason for that is really so the counselors have the time to write the letters. For us, we, are spending minimally 45 minutes to an hour on every student. So if you imagine that, and we each have about 55 students, so you guys can do the math, that's a lot of writing between now and 11/1 for 50% of our students. And we're here during the day meeting with students and families. So a lot of it's like us on our couch doing stuff at night. So we really kind of have to plan better and the best we possibly can, so that letter is very strong. I saw a question, yes. Mm-hmm. So the question is, I've had coaches, and are you talking about athletic coaches or like college coaches? Okay, so an athletic coach or anybody is asking for the school profile. That is a public document. So the 18-19 one is on our website, and yes, we could certainly give you a copy. That's yep. So basically what that is a summary of Swampscott High School. The first, the colleges really are looking at the first 2 pages. It's a summary of the town, kind of where we're located, population, how many schools we have, just kind of a brief overview contextually of our town. And then the second page is about SAT scores, how many honors classes we offer, how many AP classes we offer, how our students are performing on those tests, what percentage of the students are going to directly to a 4-year and 2-year schools, and what those numbers look like. So the colleges use the school profile as a way to inform the way that they look at the transcript. It provides some context for evaluating the opportunities that the students have taken advantage of as reflected through their transcript. So the Swampscott High School profile is on the guidance website. But I bet if you Googled Swampscott High School profile, it would come up. You have? Okay. Feel free to send me a private email, and I'd be happy to get that to you in PDF also. But it is through the guidance website, which is a Google site, which is linked through our site. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I'm not a tech guru, but that might have something to do with it. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're close. Yep, we're a couple weeks away. Yeah. So the question is, if you have an 11/1 deadline and your student, your son or daughter, is still working on a lot of the applications, like, eek, what do we do? Don't panic. I promise it's going to be fine. If your student hasn't had a meeting yet, or hasn't set up a meeting, we should say, for an 11/1 deadline, your son or daughter should plan on doing that. And so what happens in those meetings? We ask that a senior meeting is really required for all students before winter break. We kind of look at it like, for those students who have an 11/1 or an 11/15 deadline, it's best for us to be meeting with those students between now and that time frame. And as we get closer to 11/1, we can start sort of like the second phase. But we'd really like to meet with those students. We talk about where they are in the process, what their Common App looks like. We will review the activities list. A major portion of the conversation will be centered around positioning of the application, the language used in the application, the content of the essay, the way that the essay reads, the way that the activities list looks. If you haven't yet looked at the activities list with your son or daughter, that's a place where we'd like you to spend some time with them if you haven't already. That I see as an opportunity to present themselves in a very polished and professional way. The power of language is endless. So the activities list will ask the students to identify the 10 most important activities that they have participated in. And we kind of think about that as like, decreasing order of importance. And so importance, you might look at the activities to which you've dedicated the most amount of time, for which you have the most amount of love and passion and excitement, through the activities where you've done for a couple years, perhaps. If you don't have 10, or if a student doesn't have 10, that's totally fine. They are not looking for the jack of all trades. They are looking for you to have a couple key things that are really meaningful to you that you can talk about, that are part of your identity. They are not looking for, I always call it like the Cheesecake Factory menu. Like, you're not good at everything. You can't be, it's impossible. So you want to really kind of hone in your focus, and the activities list is a place where you can do that. So not only are you identifying the most important activities to you, the students have to take the opportunity to write well and use very punchy, action-oriented language that explicitly describes what it is that they have done. So, for example, if you are an accomplished pianist and you want that to live on your resume, it is important to think about what it means to be an accomplished pianist and describe, using that opportunity for 150 characters, how you have been accomplished. How did you get accomplished? Were you invited places? Have you earned anything? Are you competitive? Was something selective? And using your language to describe how it is that those activities have been both meaningful and important to you. And the students will argue with us and say, well, we only had a few characters. There's plenty of room to be able to do this effectively. So we will spend a lot of time on that. And we will also spend a lot of time on the essay, just as Julie was talking about. We know your students, and so we want, reading as an admissions counselor, does this essay read like your child? And in some cases, the students get so caught up in the imaginative writing and stories of it that it becomes too storied and too far away from what they're trying to accomplish and who they are, and it doesn't sound like them anymore. So we will work very closely on that in the senior meeting. So I did get kind of far away from where we were, but the senior meeting, we will also talk about a lot of that logistical stuff. So when you'll hear the students talk about matching Common App and signing a FERPA waiver, we don't want you to stress about all of that. We'll take care of that with them. I had a question earlier before we began about the Common App and Naviance boot camps. Our primary objective with the students for those boot camps is to accomplish a lot of the logistical application, matching, requesting transcripts, requesting teacher recommendations, all through Naviance, as a way to connect to all of the little pieces so everything can get to the colleges in time and in the proper way. So if your son or daughter has an 11/1 deadline, to get back to your original question, Corey, ask them to have a meeting with us, and if they haven't met with us yet, please set up a meeting with us. We're not gonna leave your kids hanging. We've never missed a deadline. The deadlines are for the students. So when you see the 11/1 deadline, that means they want the student application by 11/1. Again, we've never missed a deadline, so our stuff will be there by 11/1, but the importance of that deadline is for the student. Okay, applying early. Yes, we're applying early. Do you guys want to talk about this, or do you want me to just keep going? Yes. I am so glad that you asked that, because it's exactly what we're going to talk about. Don't freak out. Don't freak out. So, I'm going to tell you what the regular decision deadline is. The regular decision, I think this is a good place to start. The regular decision deadline is around January 1st. This is for at this point, it's somewhere between 40 and 60% of our students are applying for the first time in January. That is totally, completely fine. The students aren't behind if they're not applying early. They are not, there is nothing wrong with it. The college isn't looking at the student any less favorably if they apply at the regular decision deadline, except I'll talk about an early decision a little bit from an admission standpoint. But there is absolutely no reason to panic. If the student is not ready to submit an application by November 1st, it's fine. It's great. One of the reasons why you would apply in January as opposed to November 1st, and I'll get to the reasons why you're applying November 1st, is because you want to take that opportunity to show the colleges and universities that you're applying to that you've continued to stay on this path of committing to your education, and your quarter one grades really show it. So not only does your course list show it, the the classes that you've chosen for this senior year, but your grades also show it, and that's really important to the colleges. Your senior year grades, no matter when you apply, are really important to the colleges. In fact, the UMass system will, and we've talked about this, you've probably heard me say this before, or one of us say this before, that when some of the schools who recalculate a GPA will go and recalculate all of the grades that the students have on their transcripts, that they'll weight that quarter one grade with the same weight that they're weighting in their recalculated GPA, the junior year final average grade from English. So their quarter one senior English grade looks exactly the same in a recalculated formula as does their junior year final average grade. So it's really important. So for a lot of students, having that quarter one transcript is crucial to the application. So when you apply early, why would you apply early? So early just means you're submitting your application earlier than that regular decision deadline. There are two early application major deadlines: early action and early decision. I'm just going to tell everybody all over again what the difference is. Early action is that you apply early, you hear back early, and you can decide to enroll in that school or not. That is your decision. So early action, you apply early, you hear back early, generally in December, and you have an opportunity to make a decision to enroll or not, but you don't usually tell them until May 1st anyway. That's early action. Early decision, I think an easy way to think about it is, early decision, you've made the decision. You're 100,000% convinced this is the school for you, this is the right fit, you want nothing else. Financial aid doesn't need to be a consideration. This is the school for me, I've already made the decision, I'm going, it's a contract. Students apply 11/1, they hear back roughly December, sometimes January. If they get in, they're going. The guidance counselor signs a contract as part of the Common App. Students put in a parent or guardian email address, it sends it to you, you sign off saying, yes, I agree, this is a contract, we've made the decision, we're coming if you accept me, and the students do that as well. And so that is a binding contract. There is some thought out there that there is a little bit of wiggle room if financial aid award comes back wildly different than your EFC, your expected family contribution, would have predicted. And so you get that EFC number by going through the FAFSA process. And so you, as parents and guardians, should be really familiar with those numbers in talking to the student. So why would you apply early action over early decision and vice versa? In the early action situation, an advantage is that you apply early and you hear back early. For many students, hearing back early and acceptance is a major relief, a huge weight off their shoulders. I want to say a disadvantage, but a consideration for applying either early action or early decision is that everyone kind of knows, all applicants, when I say everyone, all applicants know that the information they're providing in terms of transcript and SAT or ACT scores are what they want them to be, or what the school, or they're going to either meet or exceed the mid 50% of the school's published numbers. So the students are feeling really confident that their transcript and their SAT and their ACT scores are going to be able to stand on their own no matter what. They don't need that quarter one to show their commitment to school and commitment to academic challenge and risk. They have that history. They've built that story already. They don't need those quarter one grades to help kind of continue to bolster their transcript or application. So the advantage is hearing back early in both cases. A possible disadvantage is really just that a student may feel like, I really kind of need that quarter one time frame. And another disadvantage in the early decision possibility is that you will not know financial aid award at that time. And you're kind of signing up for something before you know exactly how much it will cost. In that regard, it's a little bit putting the cart before the horse. So those are the early action, early decision deadlines, but there is no, oh my God, I'm late if I'm not doing early. That's not how it works. It is just a regular decision deadline. Has always been, like, probably when we all applied to schools, was like the majority of us applied regular decision, and it wasn't such like a crazy strategic game that everyone stressed about. And now the advantage for a lot of students is early action and early decision. And about somewhere between 40 and 60% every year will submit an early application. For a lot of the students that are applying for a lot of their safety schools, that can feel really likely, school safety likely. that can feel really good for a lot of the students to have something in their back pocket where they know they have an or several options on the table. That, again, can be reassuring and comforting. You know, as we've said in many times before, it is a long haul between the junior time when we start to have these conversations and like March, April, when we're still talking about the same things. Not so much we as the counselors, but the students at home and the parents and the aunts and the neighbors and what are you doing? What are you thinking about majoring in? It's a long time, and it's a long time to worry and to stress and to not be sure. So we are aware of that. So in many cases, that can kind of feel nice for the students. And then, this is what I would say, just one final thing about early action, early decision is to look at, some schools will tell you up front that they prioritize the early deadlines for some of the merit aid and financial aid awards. So that, with thousands of schools, it's impossible to remember all of them year to year, and things change every year. So I would, encourage you to look at websites and feel free to ask, the admissions committee, do you prioritize early action, early decision applications for merit aid? And that's a totally fair question. The last bullet here is IEP or 504. So if a student has an IEP or a 504, that is, it is totally up to the student and the family to decide whether or not they'd like to disclose that information. That is not something that we talk about unless the student asks, specifically that we do address either an IEP or a 504. In some cases, that could explain a dip in a transcript sophomore year and a student was found eligible for an IEP, and maybe there's a conversation there, or maybe that's something that the student would like to talk about in the additional information section. Same with the 504, and again, like that has nothing, we will not speak about it unless the students and families really would like us to speak about it. At the college level, once the students are on campus, the laws are very different. It is no longer about success in the educational environment, it is about access, and so these students must disclose on their own to the Office of Student Support Services, and so they would go to the office, disclose a disability, bring current documentation. They'll probably ask for updated testing within a 3 to 5 year window, and that will be a family responsibility to provide that information, and a student responsibility to go to that office and have a conversation about that. The college at that point will decide what is an appropriate accommodation to make for a student and for the professors in that environment. That will be totally managed by the college. We don't have that documentation in our office. That comes from the Office of Student Support Services. So if you anticipate wanting or needing that information, you can certainly ask for the IEPs from the Student Support Services. We do, I'm sorry, I misspoke. We do have a copy of the 504 and any testing that we've done here, but not the IEPs. So for 504s, if you're looking for some of that documentation, we do have copies and can provide that to you. And any testing that we would have done within the building, we can provide that to you for the 504s only. All evaluations and IEP documentation will live in the Office of Student Support Services. Sorry about that. Any questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, if I understand correctly, the question is about, early action and early decision. Is it really that you're showing your interest in the school, and is it at a disadvantage to wait, and does the school interpret that as like maybe I'm not as interested as maybe some of my peers that are applying early? Did I interpret that correctly? Yeah, and if they need that quarter one grade to sort of help bolster their application. Most things in college admissions, the answer is it depends. So really for early action, the vast majority of schools don't prioritize. They don't read an early action application necessarily think that, oh my gosh, I'm so excited he applied early. I interpret that primarily as the student must be really interested in my school. With the rise of common applications and the ease and efficiency of sending the applications, colleges are aware that they receive tens and thousands of applications for early action. So I wouldn't necessarily say that the college will be interpreting their early application as a strong demonstrated interest primarily in the school. I wouldn't necessarily say that. Again, it depends on the school. Early decision is a little bit different. Early decision is in part motivated on the school's end by what they call yield. So the schools are out right now doing college visits. They're talking to students, they're gauging interest, they're tracking students from the very time that students take PSATs. They want to know what students are interested in their schools. After all, most of this is a business. And so in the early application, the colleges receive a pool of very strong applicants, and many schools will pull as much and accept and admit as much as 40 to 50% of their incoming class. And the reason for that is they know they're going to be strong students. They've said they're coming. It's a contract. They can predict the amount of revenue coming in for that number of students, and they can build their class in the way that they'd like to. From an admission standpoint, the ED application does signal to the school, obviously, that this is my primary goal, this is my interest, I love this school, I am coming. And so you can interpret it that way because it's a contractual agreement. Not so much with the early action, but again, it really depends on the school. BC doesn't necessarily interpret that like that, but BU might. And so I don't know that, I'm just making up examples, but BC actually doesn't care about early action. I don't know about BU. But again, it's impossible to keep up with everything because everything changes every year, but certainly ED is a strategic admissions choice in many cases, but it's also has financial implications for it. Yes? So the question is, if you do early decision and you get accepted, are you totally stuck if the financial aid is really, really different? And I would say you'd need to call the school individually. I wouldn't want to say yes or no. The school is anticipating that if you send an early decision application, that you've done your research as a student and a family, and you know exactly how much that school costs, and you've done your research and gone on their net price calculator and have done some research on your own and factored that into the decision to apply early decision. So that, I see that as kind of like a student and family responsibility in terms of the financial aid. I think the idea is that they're publishing the information for you to be able to predict those numbers, and if it's not a financial choice for your family, they understand that. But I would say the wiggle room really in there financially is around the disparity between the EFC that you might have expected and what they're offering you in terms of financial aid award. I'm sorry, can you say that again? I didn't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry, I misinterpreted your question. So you're saying that if you don't get the financial aid award that you want and you want to apply then to other schools, you'd have to call the college. I mean, I think it's the same idea that they want you to have been able to to figure that out on your own before.
Hi, just going back to your question about the early action and then the quarter one grades. Some schools, again, it all depends. There's over however many, 3,000 colleges or something, I don't know. Some schools, because in as much as it is a business for them, and then we think of it as this is such a game and it's like playing chess, they really are not out to get anybody. So a lot of schools, if the student is on the cusp, they'll request the quarter one grades from us when they do finally come out. So right around November 1st, November 15th is early action, and that's right around the time that our quarter one grades are coming out. So they're receiving and reading applications, and they're looking at these applications and saying, ooh, I wonder how they did, because they're right there. And then they'll request either from the student to ask us or directly to us and ask us to see the quarter one grades to see if that's like the bump they needed to get into that school for early action, or sometimes they'll get deferred to regular decision. Sure. Yes, they will ask. Yes.
Yes, sorry, thank you. Yep. So Rachel just said, I don't know if you heard her, but she was saying, so not only will the school possibly request it from either us or the student can proactively request it from us. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you for mentioning that. So we send the initial transcript. Initial just means the first time that we've ever sent it. So that for a student who's applying early, it'll be the transcript freshman, sophomore, junior year grades. For a student who's applying for the regular decision deadline, that will include the quarter one grades, not yet quarter two. So we send the initial transcript. We will send a mid-year transcript to all schools, and we will send a final transcript. The students need to request an initial transcript. They don't need to request a mid-year. Again, that goes automatically. And they don't need to request the final one because we know where they're going at that point. They look at every single quarter grade. They never see exams. They only see quarters. But we do report quarter one and quarter two individual grades on the transcript when they go. So, and again, students can ask us. We won't send automatically. There will be no way for us to know if the students want their quarter one grade sent. But they can certainly ask us to do that. And that truly is a click of a button, pretty much. Yes. Mm-hmm. 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 Great question. So the question is about, back in our day, you'd send a check with each individual application, and it's very similar, except for at the end, when you're getting to submit for a school, it's going to pop up a payment page, just like you would when you're on Amazon. So you're going to enter your credit card information, and you'll push submit, and it gets charged to a card.
Oh, definitely by then, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The question is about AP exams in May 2020, when you've already made your decision, you have your admissions decisions already decided. Yes, any advanced placement course at Swampscott High School, the expectation is that the students take the exam at the end. The course is based on prepping for the exam, so we really want to see those students follow it through to the end and take the exam. The scores from those exams can only help the students at the college level. It could never hurt them. There is, in that Common App testing section, you can tell the college, I anticipate taking this many exams in May 2020, and if the score is going to help you get credit at the college level, you would go ahead and send those scores and get that college credit. If the scores are in the average or the below average, it's a loss to the student, but it really doesn't hurt them at all at the college level. And to your point about paying for college, in Common App, there's one tab where you fill out everything, and that is the section that goes to every college. And then you need to add colleges individually, and you're going to be submitting each college application individually. You're not submitting to 10 schools at once. So you are saying, okay, I'm ready for my, Boston University application. I'm going to answer their supplemental questions. I'm going to make sure everything looks good for Boston University. I've said I want to live there. I've said I want to start in fall 2020. I've said what I want to major in. And then it gives you the payment page for that specific college. You click the buttons, you give your credit card, and you pay just to submit to BU. And then you move on to the next one when you're ready. So it doesn't all have to happen in one evening. You can plug away at this when the students are ready.
through the Common App?
So the question is about colleges are trying to lure students. They want to get as many students to apply to their universities as possible, so they can get the statistics of admitting or denying students, to be honest. But yes, I mean, if you're going to save $75 by the university offering you a free admission, I think we're all fine with you absolutely taking that opportunity and save the $75. Sometimes that means even though they may accept the Common App, they're directing you to their website for an institutional application. That's completely fine. The student needs to go into Naviance and identify that they are now using an institutional application. In the colleges I'm applying to tab, they would click the little edit pencil. They would say, I'm using the institutional application. And that doesn't really change. We are still able to submit our recommendations and transcripts through Naviance and save the $75.
Sure. So when that happens, if it's a Common App school and it's still saying you can apply with a fee waiver through Common App, when you get to the payment section, it will have a box saying fee waiver from the institution, and that's what you click. It's a fee waiver from the institution. That's fine. Back there, hello. Correct. So it does depend on the school. Some schools, so the question was, can you just self-report on the Common App and then send the scores after they've been accepted? So the answer to that, as we mentioned it I think earlier, was that it does depend on the school. Some schools just allow the self-reporting right now on the Common App, and then when you are accepted, you can then officially send the scores from College Board after that. So I think it is a matter of doing the research ahead of time and just seeing where you can kind of save the money up front at first. Any other questions before we move on to good old financial aid? Yes? Mm-hmm. Yes, correct. You do. You should. So parents, the question is, do parents have their own separate login for Naviance? Everyone should. Okay, so if you do not have your own parent login, please email your guidance counselor. Or not. Hold on.
Can I have a show of hands? Who doesn't have Naviance login and wants one? Okay. That's fine, no problem. So save your guidance counselor a lot of back and forth. We'll send an email blast to all the parents that have not yet registered, and it'll send you like a unique code. You'll go to the website, say, I think there's still a link that says students and families, and it says, I need to register. So don't try to log in, just I need to register. So we'll send you a code. We'll do that, what's tomorrow, Thursday? Tomorrow or Friday. And then if you still haven't gotten anything from us by the end of the week, then ping your guidance counselor and we'll get it to you. Yes, question in the back. Yeah. Yeah. No. So the question is, if we had a Naviance account several years ago, would we register again? And the answer is no. If you have another child that graduated from here that used Naviance, you can email Lisa Brown or your guidance counselor, and we can just figure out, there's a way to link the two children. So you can toggle back and forth. Sometimes, obviously there are students who are in school together and both are using Naviance. Any other questions before we move on? Yeah. Yeah, so the question is there a place for people who forgot how to log in? So, yeah, so like if you forgot your password, but you're pretty sure you know your email address, you can just do forgot password and it'll do a reset password. Is that not the question? Sure, you mean like you don't know the website? Okay, so if you've already registered, you plug in your email address as your username. Like, so for me, I do like emilyzotto@gmail, and your password would be whatever you think you might have done at, last year or last time you logged in. And if you don't remember, you can just do reset password. Got it? Awesome. Anybody else before we move on? I'm sorry, it's really not very exciting either. It's like maybe the driest part. So the guidance counselors will definitely help with some of the financial aid application pieces, mostly for the students that either don't have a lot of support at home or can't figure it out on their own. With the families, we'll do a little bit of that. By and large, though, the guidance counselors don't spend a lot of time getting into the financial stuff with the students and families. Is just really not, I think there's a boundary there. It's really just not our place. That's your business. We don't want to, and also we don't want to mess anything up, and you don't want us to mess anything up. So we don't spend a lot of time, like, too much in the actual application itself. That really is something that the students and families will do largely on their own. To give like the overview of financial aid and what it is, financial aid really breaks down into two big pieces. One is merit-based aid, and the other is need-based aid. Merit-based aid is really, it pays to do well in high school when you go to college. Merit-based aid is evaluated at each individual institution, so it's going to look different for every school and every program, every student, every situation. It is based on the GPA, the transcript, the rigor, in some cases, the types of classes, if you're applying to specific programs. They look at your GPA, your transcript, and then they also look at your standardized test scores, so either the SAT or the ACT, whichever you submitted or whatever the composite score is for that particular test. So they're looking at those scores. A lot of schools will say, we will, the sticker price is $60,000 a year or $45,000. We'll give you the, president's scholarship for $15,000, renewable every year, as long as you maintain X GPA. So a merit-based aid is either scholarships or institutional grants that the college is giving the student and family based on GPA, transcript, and SAT scores. It's money generally you never have to pay back. Most of them are renewable, although not all of them, so you're going to want to pay attention to the fine print. We'll get to the fine print in a second, or at least the way that it's shown to you. So merit-based aid is really just that, and that's the best kind of aid. And when we think about scholarships or grants in general, in terms of GPA and SATs and the stuff that the students have accomplished already in school, that's where you're getting the best bang for your buck at the college level. So don't discredit colleges or universities at their sticker price because you think that the student or as a family you won't be able to necessarily afford that sticker price if you haven't yet factored in merit-based aid. Schools will publish whether or not they are awarding merit-based aid, how much they award every year, and they will also publish if they meet 100% of demonstrated need. And that's the other section. So there's merit-based aid and then there's need-based aid. Merit-based aid is all student GPA transcript scores. Need-based aid is all based on the application forms that you provide. So either the FAFSA or the CSS profile or both. They use all of that information. They see how much the federal government and what the institution thinks that you should be able to afford based on household income largely, and then they'll make a decision about how much money they are willing to give you from the college to meet your out-of-pocket costs. So there's a little bit of a difference in the financial aid applications. Actually, the major difference between the applications are one that it costs to send the CSS, and also that it's, like I said earlier, it's very intricate and invasive. They ask a lot more questions than the FAFSA. The FAFSA is largely just based on your tax return. They go prior year, so it's not last year's tax return, it's the year prior for you. And that's it. They don't look at home equity, they don't look at anything else. The CSS profile is different. They're gonna ask a lot of information. They're gonna ask you for the home assessment value. They're gonna ask you, moving forward a few steps, they're gonna wanna understand it. Would you be able to take out a home equity loan to be able to afford to pay college? So they're gonna be looking at a lot of information. If you have a divorced family or divorced parents, they not only want the custodial parent with which the child lives, they also want to see the non-custodial parent. They also wanna know, if I'm divorced, did I remarry? Did my prior husband remarry? What do all those finances look like? The FAFSA doesn't look at that, the CSS does. So just keep that in the back of your mind. And that sometimes can take a lot of coordination and a lot of time to complete the CSS profile. So that's something to think about. So they'll be using both of those things. So basically, why does the CSS even exist? So when the FAFSA was developed as a way, when there were more students, I want to say it was in the early 70s or maybe mid 70s, when there were more and more students applying to colleges, Congress decided, like, let's kind of standardize this process, and they developed the FAFSA as a way to kind of tell all the colleges in a really easy way what a family should be able to afford. Well, each individual college kind of said, well, we've had this institutional methodology of kind of like figuring out what we want to know about the student and family financial situation, and we're going to still ask those questions anyway. And so that is how the CSS got developed. So some schools will just use the FAFSA, some schools do both. Regardless of the situation, financial aid deadlines are serious deadlines. They are not messing around. Do not give them any reason not to give you money. If you miss a deadline, colleges are notorious for not being forgiving about those deadlines. So don't miss the deadlines. Know them. They're published. They're all on the website. That is entirely a student and family thing to manage. But you should be, so the reason they changed the FAFSA a few years back to include the prior year, so it's not just last year's tax return, so no one's waiting for like the integration tool and the IRS to come through. It's much less messy than it used to be. You can predict about how much money you're gonna make through the financial aid award process from the federal government, and you can get that done as soon as October 1. So October 1, both the FAFSA and the CSS profile open for this coming graduation year and enrollment year, so enrollment for fall 2020. Oh, it's such a good question. I'm so glad you asked that. So the question is, how much time do you have to complete all of this information? Well, they're going to tell you. It opens October 1, and they're going to tell you what their financial aid deadlines are. And of course, as we keep saying, it depends. It depends on the school. It depends on the state. And it depends on which applications. So you're going to need to pay attention to the financial aid deadline. Sometimes you have more than one, so you need to pay attention to it. So the FAFSA may be due, for the state, it may be due in March, but for the school, it's due in January. So those are things you need to pay attention to. Thank you for asking that question. There are a lot of free events for the FAFSA. Again, this presentation is linked, so we'll send it out so you guys can have all these links. And I think it actually was included in the reminder for this evening, and we did just send it to the students as well. But MIFA, the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, will run some free seminars, sometimes planning for college, sometimes about savings, and then also they'll do how to pay for college, and then they also do what they call FAFSA days, and so we usually will publish a number of them, but if you Google FAFSA days Massachusetts, it's like the free seminar where you can go. They usually are like a big chunk of the day, or in the evening where you can go and you can sit and you can bring your tax return and you can have somebody help you. So if you're feeling a little bit nervous about that process, there are resources available for students and family. Just something to know about the FAFSA, the students have to have their own what they call FSA ID, and the parents have to have their own FSA ID. Ultimately, once the FAFSA is ready to be signed and sent to the colleges, both parties, parents or guardians and students need to sign so it can be sent. So you will see that the students actually do have a portion of responsibility, but in terms of completing the application, largely that ends up being a parent or guardian responsibility. So you have the merit-based aid and a need-based aid. And when you get your financial aid award letters, sometimes they come with the application acceptance or deferral or denial. Sometimes, or not denial, they wouldn't be giving you a financial aid award if you weren't getting in there. Sorry about that. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're like a couple weeks. Usually they're within 2 to 3 weeks after the application. Sometimes they come, again, it all depends. So don't panic if the financial aid award letter doesn't come with the application decision. The financial aid award letter will show you what is available to the students in terms of award. So it will show you them, and they try to organize it, but pay attention to the way that it's written. So they'll show you the merit-based aid, what the school is offering to give you from the school in terms of money that you don't have to pay back. Again, you're going to want to pay attention to, is that renewable every year and how? So that you see the merit-based aid is usually listed up top. And then they'll show you need-based aid is going to be broken down into any scholarship and grants that are available through the federal or state government or their institution. So any possibilities based on need alone for a student to access free scholarship or grant dollars. So there's the merit free money, and then there's the need-based free money. And then they'll show you a possibility of work-study. Work-study is a job where students can work on campus and kind of study at the same time. So some of us in college worked at like the fitness center or in the library, and where you can work about 10 hours a week and make a little bit of extra money, generally like, I don't know, $1,500, $2,000 maybe a year, the two semesters that they're there. You know, if you're thinking about the total, that amount of money, you just have to remember that usually those dollars don't go directly back to tuition. Sometimes it's like the money for books or money for laundry or for pizza or whatever it is, but usually that money doesn't come back to the total tuition number. So just kind of think about that in your mind. So that's called the work-study program, and that is determined through need-based aid through FAFSA. And that's the only way that it becomes available to a student. So you'll see that. And then they'll show you loans. They'll show you options for loans. You do not necessarily need to take those particular loans that they're offering to you. Those are options available to you. Again, look at the fine print. They'll be largely, you'll see subsidized or unsubsidized. The subsidized loans are always the better loans. But again, you're gonna wanna look at the fine print in the APR. Subsidized really just means for this instance that the total amount that you take out does not accrue interest until after the student has graduated. So any subsidized loan that you see, you'd want to definitely strongly consider a subsidized loan versus the unsubsidized loan, where the interest does accrue on the principal that you've taken out while the student is in school, and that can be a considerable amount of money even by the time that the student has graduated. So again, and those are options. So like you might see Parent Plus loan, for example, which is an unsubsidized loan. Again, that's a suggestion. You do not have to take that, but they are offering it to you as a possibility of what most parents or guardians will do. So they're options. But again, read the fine print. Are things renewable every year is a huge consideration as you're sort of projecting out for 4 years or 2 years or what have you. So your question is? Yep, so the financial aid award letter, which is basically, they call it financial aid award letter, which is what you get when the colleges say, okay, you've been accepted, this is your package that we're offering you. And they'll list out on that the opportunities for loans. But you don't necessarily have to take those loans. If if your student is going to UVM, for example, Vermont allows you to, or has in years past, allowed you to take out loans from their state. In addition, you could take out loans from, from Massachusetts through MIFA, and that might be available to you, but that may not be printed on the letter. So those are things that you kind of have to do in terms of family research. I'm sorry, I think there's a question, but I didn't see it or hear it. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. That's a great question. So the question is, how is a 529 plan calculated into it? So that's going to go, that's something to think about for as you fill out the FAFSA. So the 529 is a parent asset. The student is the beneficiary of the 529s. So you do not want to put it down under student assets on the FAFSA. So if a 529 comes in as a parent asset, it is calculated, but at a much lower clip or lower rate than if you were to factor it into the student asset portion. Something to, other considerations for numbers would just be paying attention to student income. It has been that, if a student is making over $6,000 a year, which largely most students aren't making over $6,000 a year, that within sort of that number, that they're not sort of like compromising their ability to get financial aid. But if it's above that, sometimes they will. Any savings that they have, although it's great that they have savings, it's better if it's not in the student's name. Parents are assessed at a much lower rate than students are. So if that's an option. So again, 529s are a parent asset, not a student asset. Students are the beneficiary. Any other questions? Yes. So if I understand the question is if you're having trouble navigating Naviance, kind of what to do, is that right? I'd say contact your counselor directly, or better, Great. Ms. Sturmas, got it. Got it. Contact the counselor or have the student, come in. We are, again, asking that the students have a meeting with us before the end of the year. I think our like unofficial policy is like, we like to meet with the students and the parents is totally fine. You guys, of course, are more than welcome to come. We'd love to have you anytime, every time. But it's not as productive if we're having a meeting about the student's plans for after high school without the student. So it's kind of like our unofficial policy. The student has to be there for that meeting. But our required senior meeting, you guys don't have to be part of it. If we realize everyone has very busy schedules, and so we can certainly do that on our own. And usually we'll send a follow-up email or give them a checklist of a to-do list, and sometimes we'll CC parents. So if you want us to do that, we can certainly help with that. But this is it's a disadvantage to have the students have parents or guardians manage this process for them. Again, going back to that sort of idea of the very beginning, obviously the application process is just an application process, but there are going to be a number of setbacks and roadblocks that the students need to manage on their own. It's about life expectation management. When they get an email from the school that says, we haven't received your transcript, we don't want you guys to panic. We want the students to deal with that. The answer to that is it's already been sent. They just haven't downloaded it yet, so we don't want anyone to panic about it. But we want the students to be in charge of managing the process, having the conversations with the counselors, being able to pick up the phone and calling an admissions office and say, hey, this is Joey Smith. I'm sitting here with my guidance counselor. I just had a conversation about my application. I submitted a few weeks ago. My counselor, is confirming that she sent the transcript at that time. We just wanted to double check that you really still don't have it. I'm happy to send it. Happy to have my counselor send it again. We want those students to develop those skills. It's a disadvantage for them not to. Further, it's even more of a disadvantage if you start to do this whole process with them and they lose the self-discovery piece. Because what's really fun is watching the students eyes light up and say, I went to an all-women's college and I never really thought that was going to be for me, but all of a sudden that was such a good fit and I felt comfortable. I'm so excited. I finally feel like I have, I found my voice. I can totally see myself in that environment. Those are the things that we want the students to be in charge of and to feel really good about, because they do end up feeling really good about themselves and their process. Or if they're applying for nursing schools right out of the gate, and that's been what they wanted all of junior year, all of senior year, all high school, and they get all their admissions decisions back, and they were accepted to UMass, and all of a sudden Eisenberg School of Management is what they wanted. Who knew? And that's something that they need to discover on their own. And so all of these things are possible. It is an evolution really of self, so allow the students the opportunity to to do that on their own, with us and with you. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. So the answer is a couple different answers. So the question is about how to manage scholarships. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. I thought I was done, but I'm not. But I'm sorry. Let's go to scholarships real quick, and then we can let you go to bed. So how to spend the time with scholarships. So there are a number of different scholarships out there. You could spend endless hours, or the students could spend endless hours developing essays for scholarships that are posted on FastWeb or FinAid.com for the Gatorade Scholarship or the Bill Belichick Scholarship or whatever it is. Those opportunities are certainly out there. We say to students, you have at it. If you feel like you are ready and you have the time and you feel like you're researching scholarships and you found something that's a good fit to you and it's speaking to you and you feel like this is worth your time, absolutely go for it. All of the different qualifications and eligibility requirements will be published on whatever websites the students are looking at. So part of it's to cast your net really wide. If you're looking at FastWeb, you're going to be seeing stuff all over the world for scholarships. If you're looking on Naviance, we're posting through Naviance under scholarships. There's a scholarship list. A lot of stuff that's really just kind of coming through our desk that we get emails about, that people drop off, that's local, community, regional, New England types of scholarships. Generally, those are more local. If you think about the difference in pools and differences in selectivity, the idea really is do you want your students spending the time on the Koch scholarship if, there are a number of different competitors for those same amount of dollars? You've got somebody in Shanghai, you have somebody, outside of Paris, and we have somebody in Swampscott. They're all applying along with another 10,000 applicants. Or is it better to spend the time and the resources increasing our likelihood of accessing dollars by going on the more local and regional scholarship lists? And so totally up to you again, but there are sort of different types of scholarships and different tiers of scholarships. It's really up to the student. And then of course some of those colleges will have their own separate applications, but again, that's something that students and families can look at. So there's the sort of global, national scholarships that you can find on FastWeb and that kind of thing, and then there's the scholarship list in Naviance, and then finally there's our scholarships. We will definitely continue to help the students walk through that process. And those, if you've been to a graduation before, you might remember that at graduation there are a number of different scholarships which are announced at graduation. So there's a process for that. The students will begin to apply in late winter, early spring. They'll submit a resume for it, they'll submit an essay for them, and they apply. They don't, and we don't know about who the recipients are until actual graduation day. So in terms of planning financing, that's kind of a tough consideration because you really don't know, and sort of, I guess, imagine in your mind that those are kind of like bonus dollars that may come in. And so we can certainly help point students in one direction or another with regard to the scholarship list and FastWeb and finaid.com, for example, but really it's up to the student to kind of look at the resources available to them and see what would be the best fit for them. Does that answer your question? And so we just threw up a couple additional events. We are extremely cognizant of the fact that 81% of our students are going directly to a four-year school, but that really is not our entire population. And although those percentages are smaller, those percentages are real students and real people that we care deeply about, as do you, obviously. And so we are requiring that senior meeting for any and all students. We want to know and we want to help the students develop their plan, no matter what it is. Coming up, we have an additional about 11-12% of our students every year go on to community college, and largely that tends to be North Shore Community College is a great option for a lot of students. I just had a student graduate a couple years ago and email me for a transcript. He's applying to Northeastern and Tufts from North Shore, so he's done 2 years at North Shore, has done an excellent job, has developed a transcript now where he's able to apply to Northeastern and Tufts, whereas coming from Swampscott High School, those schools may have been more of a reach, and he's still going to end up with the same diploma as everybody else that's been there for the last 2 years. So it's a great consideration. We want to help students get there also, so especially with the financial landscape, that is a solid option. So again, largely is North Shore Community College, but for some students, it's Middlesex Community College or a school in Boston. We're here to help with whatever the student has identified as their plan. The November 7th is a day where we do an on-the-spot admissions for North Shore Community College. Basically what that means is the admissions director comes, she will sit with the student, she will review the application that the student will have already filled out, and then they'll have a quick conversation, a brief interview, if you will, and then the director makes a decision on the spot about whether or not they're admitted. It feels great for the students. That is an awesome opportunity, great skill development, it's perfect. So the students will know about that. We'll help facilitate the transcript and the application piece here, so you guys don't need to worry about that. We just wanted you to know about that. Link to MIFA events and then the ACAC College Fair. In the senior application checklist, which we gave out to you, which we'll also email blast, there is a local college and career fair and military, and some local employers are coming to Peabody Veterans High School, on October 3rd. I think it's from 6:30 to 8:30. Again, it's in the checklist, and we'll send it out as part of our email blast summary to all the parents. But that's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for students who aren't really sure. They maybe want a technical school. North Shore Community College will be there, but then they're also really interested in a lot of the New England schools. So a lot of those schools will be there. It's another great opportunity. Tomorrow is curriculum night. So you might be thinking, well, I kind of already been through this. I already know all this. It is still a great opportunity to have conversations with department chairs and teachers who might be here and be able to talk to you about AP level coursework or any other questions that you may have. So even though it seems like something that you might have already done before, it's still a great opportunity. So just wanted to remind you of that. That's happening. Again, FAFSA is available. We talked about the college fair. 11-1 deadline. I mean, again, the major takeaways are if a student has an 11-1 deadline or is thinking about an 11-1 deadline, better to just have a meeting with the counselor so we can kind of check in with them, kind of have a feel for where they're at and how we can direct them right now and do a quick to-do list with them. Did I do everything? Anything to add? Any other questions? No? Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks for coming.